Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. And we apologize for the slightly late start. My name is Nyabura Gedongo. I'm the Spark Storytelling Advisor, and I'd like to welcome you to this webinar organized by Spark, Mexico, Agrofin, and Dalberg Research. Today, we're pleased to be launching the report named Access and Utilization of Digital Financial and Information Services among Smallholder Farmers, Pastoralists, and Agro-pastoralists in Nigeria today. Giving the main presentation today is Daniel Makale, an analyst from Dalberg Research. We are also joined by our esteemed panelists, Benga Ario, the portfolio lead for Ikore International Development, Ugochi Izwora, head of operations, Livestock 247, Chukwu Makalu, commercial manager for Anglophone West Africa at Pula Advisors, and Dolapo Olusan Mokun, program engagement consultant with Mexico Agrofin based in Nigeria. So some quick housekeeping for today. We ask that you share your questions and comments in the webinar chat, referring to specific slides if possible, and they will be answered during the Q&A session and in an upcoming blog. We would also like to remind you that this webinar is being recorded, and that recording will be made available to you online. Without further ado, I'd like to welcome Spark Innovation Director, Chloe Stahl-Lane, who will be moderating this webinar. Over to you, Chloe.
Thank you so much, Nyambura, and welcome everyone. It's great to have you all with us. And we're really excited to be sharing these findings from the study looking at digital financial and info services in Nigeria. And this webinar is a part of a series of webinars where we have done similar studies in Kenya and Ethiopia as well. And those two previous webinars are also recorded, and there are blogs about them on the Spark website. So if you weren't with us and are interested to learn more from those other countries, please do take a look at those recordings. We can drop in the links in the chat. And today we're really excited to dig into more details about Nigeria. This research was a strong collaboration between the Mercy Corps Agrofin project, Spark, which focuses on pastoralists in recurrent and protracted crisis, including in northern Nigeria, and Dalberg research team based out of Nairobi. So without further ado, I'd love to invite Daniel to present the findings of the report. Welcome, Daniel.
Okay, thanks, Chloe. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening. My name is Daniel from Dalberg Research, and I will be taking you through today's research on exploring the use of digital financial and information services among agro producers in Nigeria. So moving forward, this is how the report is structured. We'll begin with the introduction and background, the study objectives, in order for us to understand how the study was conducted and what was its actual purpose. We will then look into demographic and socioeconomic profiles of the producers, and later we will talk about how they access and utilize digital and information services. Finally, we will explore some of the challenges that producers face in accessing digital financial and information services, as well as the potential opportunities to boost its adoption. Let's dive into the background and objectives of the study. So the study primarily utilized secondary methodology, relying on the examination of sources such as journals, publications, reputable white papers, as well as data obtained from both private and public repositories. These sources were employed in order to corroborate and reinforce the study's findings. It is important for us to note that the literature that was considered to generate these insights was 7 years old, as opposed to 5 years, which was due to the effects of COVID-19 that hampered data collection efforts. The objectives of the research were: one, to conduct an in-depth profiling of smallholder farmers, agro-pastoralists and pastoralists, through studying the value chains they participate in and how they access and use digital financial services or digital information services. The second objective was to interrogate the existing information on access and utilization of digital financial services or digital information services, whereby here we're exploring opportunities to enhance information sharing and adoption by the producers. Next, we will move to definition of the terms that we used in this particular study. So through today's presentation, we will refer to the two terms, digital financial services and digital information services. DFS is the use of digital systems, devices, and channels for the purposes of accessing finance. DIS, on the other hand, involves the delivery of information using digital channels or devices, and in this context, agricultural or financial information. It is also worth noting that in both cases, it can be through the internet, interactive voice recorder, or the IVRs, SMS, or mainstream media, with the aim of sharing information at the convenience of the user without them physically having to visit the organization that is actually offering these services. Some of the information shared can be on markets, information on finance, or information on agriculture, among other pieces of information. We then move to profiles of the smallholders, and under the profiles of the smallholders, I'm going to take you through the profiles of the producers, that is the location that they operate in, their demographic characteristics, and finally, give you a brief into the value chains that they are involved in. So as we can see in Nigeria, smallholder farmers are dominant in rural areas of the northern states. Pastoralists are equally dominant in the north. We can actually picture these from the left and right maps, respectively. You can also see that smallholder farmers are approximately 38 million, while pastoralists are approximately 15 million. They are both generally characterized by traditional farming methods and poverty. We then move to the value chains and we then move to the households characteristics. Looking at the household characteristics, majority of the households are male-headed. Pastoralism is dominated by men, probably because of the strenuous and tedious nature of the activities involved in the enterprise, which can be better handled by men. This dominance can be attributed to the fact that men are more agile and capable of engaging in laborious production activities that is associated with this kind of farming method than women. Or we can also attribute these to the cultural beliefs and practices. Both smallholder farmers and pastoralists are characterized by no education or very low education levels. On value chains, we can see that smallholder farmers have actually diversified their crop production, with maize, cassava, and yams leading their value chains. Geographically, it is worth noting that crop production varies across the regions. Different regions grow different crops. We also see that the nomads produce the chunk of the ruminants in Nigeria. According to FAO 2019, it was reported that majority of the production systems that are there are actually made of smallholder farmers and nomadic herders. We also see that sheep and goats are the most reared livestock in the ASAL states, followed by cattle and poultry. So allow me to shift gears and take us to digital financial services. We will now look at DFS, and in this section, I will take you through how the producers access and utilize digital financial services and information. Specifically, I'll highlight some of the channels they employ to access finance-related information and shed some light on their saving behaviors. So from our findings, women smallholder farmers and those under 30 years own fewer formal financial accounts compared to the men those who are above 30 years. However, most of the smallholder farmers have the necessary identification to open an account at a formal financial institution. About half of those who are registered use the First Bank of Nigeria Limited or the Diamond Bank. We also noted that women are twice likely to have bank accounts not in their names than men. So we wonder, how do they actually access these services? They mostly access their accounts from the counter at a branch. Also, they use the ATM. Only 2% access their bank accounts through mobile app from the bank, and 1% access through the institution's website. And shifting to pastoralists, about 1 in 10 pastoral households in the Asal region actually have a bank account. Looking at some of the reasons as to why smallholder farmers do not have a bank account, we see that perceived lack of money, distance to a bank, and never considering the use of an account are the main reasons for not having a bank account. Other barriers include unfamiliarity and lack of awareness with the products or processes associated with these banks. Barriers to having the bank account cut across gender. This suggests that despite facing similar challenges, the reasons fewer women than men own bank accounts may actually be related to other barriers. We then question whether informal sources is an option for producers. Overall, we see that 28% of the smallholder farmers are reported to have used at least one kind of an informal financial service. ROSCAs are commonly used informal services and which is on a regular basis. However, lack of trust in informal financial services is the main reason most of the smallholder farmers have never used the service. In addition to that, they see no need and also lack money to engage in the services, while some are not aware of the informal financial services. We then look at mobile money as a financial service, and a majority of the smallholder farmers are not aware of it. Only 3% reported to be aware, with less than 1% owning a mobile money account. Among those who have heard of it, only 27% see no benefits of having such an account. While saving is a big perceived benefit of mobile money, there is less actual knowledge on the service's ability to support savings for a long-term purpose. Compared to the national population, we also noted that smallholder farmers' awareness of mobile money is lower. The poor performance of mobile money services can be attributed to the trust deficit that farmers have on mobile money agents and providers. They have trust friends and family more when it comes to the financial matters. Or it can also be attributed to the regulatory constraints, since until 2018, MNOs were not allowed to offer mobile money services in Nigeria. They could only be offered by banks and specialist non-bank mobile money operators. So what happened? In 2018, the Central Bank of Nigeria issued guidelines for licensing and regulation of what they termed as the payment service banks, which allowed MNOs to apply for a license to become a payment service bank. Just a brief definition, a payment service bank is a type of bank run on a small scale than a traditional bank, and it does not have credit risk or foreign exchange operations. They can offer accounts such as the current account or the savings account. They also offer debit, prepaid, and ATM cards. And as a result, the CBN awarded a super agent license to MTN in 2019, which allows customers to send and receive money through agents. In terms of borrowing and saving practices, most smallholder farmers prefer saving their money at home or informally through friends and family. This is because informal financial services offer greater flexibility and convenience compared to formal financial institutions. As some of us may have witnessed, they often have fewer bureaucratic processes and more personalized approaches, which can meet the specific needs of the individuals with irregular income or limited financial resources, which is actually a characteristic of the producers that we are looking into. The good news is that they save agricultural inputs such as fertilizer, seeds, and pesticides. And we also ask ourselves whether these producers have any financial plans. And we found that, unfortunately, formal financial planning products have little traction among smallholder farmers. About a quarter have a savings plan. We can also see that the use of living wills, retirement plans are less common among these producers. Only 1% of the smallholder farmers have an insurance plan, and what they desire most is agricultural, life, and medical insurance. I'll then shift gears and move to the digital information services. And in this section, we are going to look at how producers actually access information. We see that majority of smallholder farmers see talking to friends and family as their main benefit of having a mobile phone. They consider mobile phones as important devices to the household and equally for agricultural activities. A basic phone without internet capability is the most common among the producers, while feature and smartphone use is a bit low. This prevalence of basic phones may account for some of the low perceived utility of phones as channels for receiving agricultural information. For the smallholder farmers who do not own a mobile phone, the high cost of buying the device is their main setback. However, close to half of the smallholder farmers who have never used a mobile phone will be very interested in using one, which implies a positive attitude to embrace digital products. Looking at personal mobile ownership, these rates across Nigeria vary by age, and the highest among those it is highest among those who are aged 25 to 34, which is well ahead of those who are 35 and older, which is actually the age where most of our smallholder farmers come from. And also, it is ahead of those leading those who are aged between 15 and 24 with a relative lack of purchasing power, which likely suppresses their ability to buy phones. When farmers seek information about their finances and agricultural activities, they often turn to social sources such as friends and family. This is mainly because smallholder farmers typically have close relations with friends and family members. They trust their opinions and advice, and they also feel more comfortable discussing the financial and agricultural matters with people they actually know very well. This choice can as well be attributed to the limited access to formal information sources. This is because in rural areas where smallholder farmers operate, access to formal financial institutions, agricultural extension services, and government agencies can be a bit limited. And as a result, they rely on informal networks because these are the most accessible sources for them to use. We can also see that the high cost of ICTs and ICT literacy, electricity problems, outdated contents by extension officers, and network issues are critical setbacks in using ICTs in agricultural extension work. We'll then move to challenges and opportunities that are there when using DFS and DAS among the producers. So several challenges and limitations exist. For instance, the trust deficit among mobile money providers, limited financial and digital literacy, security concerns, and regulatory constraints to overcome some of these and regulatory constraints. However, we have some recommendations to overcome some of these challenges, which include strengthening regulatory frameworks, enhancing financial literacy programs, promoting collaboration among stakeholders, and addressing infrastructural gaps for a more comprehensive digital financial and information adoption. We can see that the poor infrastructure across the North and the ASAL regions, leading to longer travel time to financial institutions, hinders producers from enjoying financial benefits. The inconvenience of extended travel motivates the producers to seek more accessible alternatives through friends, relatives, and other informal channels. Still on infrastructure, electricity is one of the key enablers for uptake of DFS and DAS. Most of the areas where producers are located have limited access to electricity, as you can see. This limited electricity access impedes the adoption of digital financial and information services by reducing the reliable use of electronic devices. Without consistent power sources, producers have challenges charging the devices, which hinders their ability to engage with digital services regularly. Improved electricity infrastructure is actually crucial for fostering widespread adoption for digital financial and information solutions in underserved areas of Nigeria where we have most of our agro producers. There's still hope. As much as uptake of digital services among smallholder farmers in Nigeria is low, there lies digital opportunities that can significantly contribute to increasing their income and productivity. Access to radio, TV, and mobile phones present a significant opportunity to increase the adoption of digital financial and information services among producers in Nigeria. Specifically, radio and TV broadcasts can serve as effective channels for disseminating information about the benefits and functionalities of digital financial services, reaching a broad audience in remote areas, hence filling the gap that was earlier on mentioned on lack of awareness. Additionally, mobile phones can act as a direct and accessible platform for farmers to engage with these services. For instance, receiving market information and accessing financial resources. If we leverage on these existing communication channels, we can bridge informational gaps, enhance financial literacy, and promote the seamless integration of digital tools into the agricultural practices of the producers in Nigeria. I will then shift and look at what are some of the opportunities that mobile money produces. So awareness of mobile money among the smallholder farmers we saw earlier is relatively low, as we had mentioned. However, there lies an opportunity for smallholder farmers to save and get credit for agricultural investments. Besides, digital financial services such as mobile banking and digital payment services provide convenient and secure ways for farmers to conduct transactions and manage their finances properly. We also saw that there is hope for adoption of mobile money as a digital financial tool since the adoption of the 2018 regulations. And finally, there is need for stakeholders in the agricultural space to increase awareness on the benefits of using mobile money. We'll then move to the last part of our presentation on where we're going to look at the gaps that we encountered when coming up with this particular report. Looking at digital financial services, there is a need for research that examines the barriers to digital financial inclusion, particularly for women and those from the marginalized groups. There is also need for quantification of the impact of access to digital financial services. Lastly, the dissection of the demographics of the pastoralist and agro-pastoralist at the national level is not well spelled out, and there is limited number of studies on how culture, gender, and language act as a barrier that hinder the access to DFS. Looking at DIS, there are gaps on the impact of digital information access, and there is limited information on the national pastoralist population that access the information. Also, research on the potential of digital financial and information services to increase smallholder and agro-pastoralist income in Nigeria specifically is quite limited. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Daniel. That was a really comprehensive overview on digital services in Nigeria, a rich set of information there. So thank you everyone listening. If you have any questions about Daniel's presentation, please do feel free to put them in the chat. And we'll be proceeding now to some comments from our panel. We have an exciting panel of entrepreneurs and innovators to provide their reflections and experiences in offering digital services. So I would like to first invite Gabenga from Ecore to share with us more about what Ecore does and how it relates to the presentation that we just heard. Welcome.
Yes, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. So I will be talking about our experience with regards to the use of digital information services, which is majorly around disease reporting. So at Ecore, we've been able to facilitate the training of about 208 community animal workers who are actually providing minor veterinary services for smallholder farmers in hard-to-reach rural communities. And these rural communities, they actually hardly have access to veterinary care for their livestock. And according to the report read by Daniel, which is actually true for today, we could actually see that the magnitude of the rural communities in the different states compared to the urban centers. It also holds true to the fact that over 80% of the food production, including the livestock production, is actually carried out in this region. Therefore, it's no news at all that the majority of the livestock disease outbreak emanate from these rural communities. Now, when these rural smallholder farmers have no access to veterinary services, so how would the state have access to the report of the disease outbreak? So this is part of the things that actually informed the establishment of the Community Animal Health Workers Program by the statutory body BCN. And to support this system, we actually facilitated the use of technology by the community animal workers to actually report diseases. Now, these digital technologies allow for instant aggregation of community of the disease reports from the field. These reports can then be utilized by the state to actually, number one, prepare a well-defined budget that will prevent wastage of their resources. And then they can also make use of this report to actually plan their vaccination schedule. Now, an example of this is an instances where one of the community animal workers that were trained had issues in their community based on his report. There had been spikes in the numbers of rabies outbreak in their region. And then because of this report, the state was able to mobilize vaccine, anti-rabies vaccines for that community, and they were able to do ring vaccination around that area. And this is just an example of what a state can actually make use of the report with. And then another thing is also, it also helps the state to actually engage their government during budget appropriation. And because with data, when you have access to data and you're able to prove a point with your data, then there's every possibility that your budget will be approved. Another issue again is that it also provides an avenue for good feedback to farmers from the state or from the implementing organization. So when you look at it again, how sustainable is this? Everything with regards to disease reporting based using the technology is actually also dependent on if the community animal workers is actually making an income from their engagement with farmers, and if the states can also provide necessary supervisory framework required for by the community animal worker. So with regards to the income, we've had less than 20% attrition of community animal workers. And one of the basic reasons is just that they make money, they make revenue from what they are in their engagement with community, with the farmer. And so, however, the major challenge still comes around with strong supervision is still an issue, because without proper supervision, then that feedback to farmer may not be there, and that necessary support, encouragement to support the community and my worker may not be there. Another issue, just like Daniel has raised, is also access to internet and then power to charge their devices. And then again, another problem is the low usage of this report by the state. So for us, if you look at it majorly, around the call to action, it will be around including the network of community animal worker as part of the community animal health care system. And then ensuring that the state supervision is well strengthened, and also it's also important, if that supervision is strengthened, then there will be avenue for the data to be used the more. So I would say Daniel's report is actually straight to it, because these are some of the things that we have seen on the field, even with regards to the usage of phone. People that have access to what type of phone, is it smartphone, is it the ordinary phone? You also see this. This is what happens on the field. So I think at this point I would say the Daniel's report is straight to the point. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gwenga. Great to hear your view and those examples from rolling out digital services in the field. Great, and it looks like there's a lot of interest in the chat about Equoria as well. If you can drop in some links for our participants to look more about the company as I invite the next speaker. We have next Ugochi from Livestock 247. Welcome, Ugochi.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Well done for the research. I think the research is quite accurate for the most part. I'm not very certain about the role. I'm still I'm going to speak more. I'm going to lean more towards the digital financing part, and that's because of I think Daniel Gwenga, the panelist before me, has done quite a good job on digital information systems, but we also have Livestock 247. We have a product, Livestock Express, that we rolled out in 2021. And essentially what we're trying to do was to reduce the adoption or the use of cash using technology within livestock markets and rural livestock communities. And one of the things that we experienced on the field, there were a lot of challenges really. And like Daniel rightly put, and also Gwenga rightly put, infrastructural deficits are the major issues that we had. Infrastructural issues, these are things that, I think that I would say is on the government's table. And so those were the main issues. But for the people now, there's a lot of cultural undertones that we need to put into consideration when we are going to these communities with our solution. So for instance, one of the things that we do in Livestock 247 for any of the projects and all of our projects, we do community entry and penetration. And going by Daniel's report, or the report he just presented by from Dalberg Research Institute, I think that it's agreeing in quotes with what we have experienced, in the sense that many times the early adopters of many of the innovations that we are bringing into the field are the men. And I think it's because culturally, the men are the ones out there, especially within these regions. They are usually your first point of contact, when you go to these communities and everything. So I think that with this research now, for us now, we'll take it and then say, when we are going to engage these community leaders, these pillars within the community, the religious leaders, the community leaders, even the market leaders, would be more intentional with engaging with them, and also explaining to them the need for gender inclusion in what we're doing. So it is very important that we begin to look at the structural undertone of this community, how it is structured as based on, the gender differences and all of that, and the different roles that gender play, and then now take that and then begin to craft your implementation or the innovation that you're bringing. So I think that that's what is going to help us develop, because I am about development of the sector, a sustainable development of the sector. Our goal in Livestock 247 is to mainstream the livestock sector. And for us, what that means is bringing the discussion of livestock into the general broader context of the economic development of the country and of Africa as a whole. So if we want to do this, that means we have to create ways for the sustainable development of the structure. And I think that another thing that needs to be done as a key takeaway from what the research says is, we need to have, will I say, like a roundtable discussion? I've been talking about this for a while now. We need to have like a roundtable discussion, and that's the word in my head, of the different players in this value chain, in the different touch points of this value chain, the different people within these spaces, the developmental agencies, the entrepreneurs, the micro entrepreneurs, and have everyone sit together and determine what your role is so that we don't have duplicity of efforts. I mean, ICORE is already doing a good job in the disease surveillance reporting and all of that, and what have you. Do we need another person coming to do that? You know, I think these are the conversations we need to have if we want to develop this sector sustainably. And then also, while we are doing all of this, we need to pay close attention to the cultural norms of these places so that we can effectively carry the women folk along. My time is almost up, and I really do not want to overshoot my time, so I will stop here, and hopefully if there's a question for me, I'll take it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Some real rich reflections there on ensuring that the purpose of our digital services is well aligned to the needs and well coordinated. So thanks, Ogochi. And please also feel free to put in any links about Livestock 247 into the chat for all the participants to learn more about what you're doing. For the next panelist, I'd like to invite Jakumwa from Pula Advisors. Welcome.
Hi, good day, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. Just reflecting on the presentation that was made. So I'll be talking on ag insurance and the role of, digital inclusion in it. So basically in Pula, we're in the business of providing parametric insurance. Jargon's fancy name, but technically we're looking at innovative ways of providing ag insurance services to the agricultural last mile, which is the end beneficiary farmers. And if you look at different business models or the traditional way of providing insurance, it would entail having boots on ground, going to each and every farm, doing your risk surveys and so on and so forth. Now imagine trying to do that for 1 million farmers that have less than, will I say, 2 or 1.5 hectares of farmland and dispersed amongst different geographies. I mean, your guess is good as mine. It's going to be an expensive endeavor. So you have to look for an innovative way to go about it. Hence the birth of, parametric insurance, whereby we leverage on technology. We use satellite remote sensing tools to do a lot of the heavy lifting and only get boots on ground on a need to have basis. So we use things like site-lags. We do things like selecting benchmarks. It could be rainfall, it could be temperature, it could be yield, it could be soil moisture, and modeling it according to the different areas that we are covering. So, I mean, the presentation said one of the highest or sought after insurance services is ag insurance. Completely spot on, because if you're looking at a lot of the rural areas, they basically do agrarian activities or affiliated activities to agrarian work, which is basically farming, livestock, crops. And we come in to bring a lot of, we bring in resilient solutions and sustainability. But we have to do it in such a way that it's cost effective and it delivers. And most times you find that you have to work with an ecosystem of players because it's difficult to sell insurance off the counter. So we work with different aggregators. Aggregators could be input dealers, it could be microfinance or commercial banks offering credits to farmers. So what we do is that we bundle. So you still have to leverage, and you still have to share information. You have to enroll farmers. When you're enrolling farmers, both for credit and insurance, you have to do it digitally because it makes more sense, even in terms of data sharing. So we like to say that end to end, our operations are fully digitized. We leverage a lot on technology, both from the standpoint of enrolling farmers, all the way to actually providing them with agricultural insurance services. And we work with an ecosystem. So this report was very, very refreshing, because you start seeing some of the pitfalls and why there are problems in expanding digital financial services to the last mile. Things like, do they have phones? What is the ecosystem there? Who do they engage with? Every different geographies have their own different peculiarities. You have to put that into consideration. And that thing we also need to watch out for is not trying to remodel or introduce a new system, but rather walk through the existing system to make it work. So if something is not broken, don't try and fix it. Just try and enhance it by bringing resilience and sustainability. And that is the role that ag insurance plays. So we're looking at keeping the farmers in the field. We're looking at compensating the farmers when they are caught up with perils, or when they have risk that crystallizes that would affect their cash flow and their livelihood. Insurance also de-risks businesses and also plays the reverse role of enhancing on unlocking access to finance into that sector. So the report really reflected on areas where innovation and technology works, and also pinpoints areas where a lot needs to be done in expanding access to digital financial services to the last mile. In a nutshell, our call to action is there's still a lot that needs to be done. Policy-wise, there are a couple of laws that are inhibiting the ability to innovate and also to distribute insurance, because there seems to be always friction between the public-run insurance corporation versus private players. So if those teaching issues can be sorted, I think you open the gates to innovation, to penetration, and to friendlier policies that can make this last mile bankable and can give them access to both insurance and financial services. So I'll stop there for now. Thank you for having me. And happy to answer questions when they fall due. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So yeah, please do put your questions for Chukwuma into the chat. And please feel free to share more about Pula Advisors as well for people who want to look more into what you're doing. And for our last panelist, I'd love to invite Dolapo from Mercy Corps AgroFin program in Nigeria. Welcome, Dolapo.
Thanks. Hi, Chloe.
Hey.
Yes, I think for Mercy Corps AgroFin, for those who maybe aren't familiar with our program, our objective essentially is to provide technical support to organizations who are delivering some kind of digital service or product to smallholder farmers specifically. So we help them design, test, and scale these digital innovations, ultimately to help the farmers improve their productivity, improve their resilience, and ultimately their incomes. And I think the findings of the research that's been done really just highlights, a lot of what we've seen in the field, working with different organizations, who are serving smallholder farmers. And I think in looking at the research and sort of building on it and sort of looking beyond it as well, I think it sort of presents. One of the things that came up was, I think, addressing the ICT infrastructure and connectivity gap for me is very foremost. It's, first of all, the farmers must have access, right? So we can't be talking, farmers accessing digital information services or digital financial services if they don't even have connectivity. So I feel like that's a conversation that needs to be had. A lot of times we want to just drop it with the government and say, well, if the government hasn't done it, there's not much we can do. But I think there are models, where we as different stakeholders playing different roles in the sector can approach this from a more innovative model. So MNOs typically often, they might not be able to justify providing connectivity to that very last mile. But in preparing for this webinar, I came across a case study whereby you have a private company who has basically bridged the gap between an MNO and an educational institution. So you have the MNOs who have their national backbone, their infrastructure backbone, and it only goes so far. But there's still a gap between them and these rural communities where these farmers live, where these pastoralists stay. And so this company literally went in and saw an opportunity there and said, okay, how can we profitably serve this sector and address this gap? And so they went to the MNO, had a discussion and said, okay, you have this infrastructure up until this point. How can we leverage this to provide bandwidth and connectivity for this institution that has, X amounts of students? And then they've gone to the institution as well and said, look, you have 10, 20,000 students. If we're able to add $7, $8 to their annual tuition for connectivity, would you like to do that? And they said, yes. This is somewhere in Delta State, by the way, for those who are familiar with Nigeria, South Nigeria. And so this company, a private company, went in, invested their own infrastructure. And obviously, we all know that electricity in Nigeria is a big problem. So even powering the infrastructure, leveraging solar and lithium batteries, they were able to purchase, they got into an agreement with the MNO to purchase a certain bandwidth on a monthly basis. And they've also been able to collect, collect the fee from the school by literally just spreading this cost across the students. And being able to, and that's a project that is ongoing, and they're hoping to scale this to different institutions. Now, while this is education, perhaps, a similar model can be looked at for the agricultural sector, because that gap, the same gap exists. And we know that there's a lot of Nigerian small-scale farmers and agro-pastoralists are underproducing, and for a plethora of reasons. But if we're able to enhance access for them to be able to access these different products and services that can address some of these key points that inhibits their, inhibits them in terms of expanding their production, whether it's in access to weather information, whether it's access to agronomy information, whether it's access to credits, or the different areas that we know are critical to farmers really being successful in terms of being able to produce well and earn good incomes from their work. I think that's a model that we can look at. We just need to basically look beyond what we have now and just look at how we can address the gap. So for me, I think moving beyond this research is how can we address this connectivity issue? And I think I think this is a model that can be replicated in agriculture. I think device ownership too is also a very big, again, the research highlights this, is a very big pain point or challenge or constraints in terms of how these farmers are accessing, or whether they can or cannot even access digital information and financial services, because device ownership is low. You have the mobile, regular basic phones, and then you have feature phones, and then you have the smartphones. There was one engagement that we were looking at as Mercy Corps AgriFin, which unfortunately never took off, but it was trying to see how we could support device financing, some devices called KaiOS, which are cheaper than mobile phones, but you can access the internet on them. For some of you who might know MCOPA, they came into Nigeria looking to distribute and finance solar lamps. That didn't prove too successful, and within a little space of time, they switched to actually mobile phone financing. And so perhaps, looking at models like that and trying to see how we can facilitate the financing of to increase mobile phone ownership amongst these communities. Because at the end of the day, the challenge for the farmer is like, do I spend the equivalent of this 30, 40 US dollars to buy a device or buy a bag of fertilizer and seeds? It's a real question. That's what they're faced with. And they probably might just decide, I think I'm going to get more from this fertilizer, because they can't see beyond, what they'll be able to benefit and access through the mobile phone, for example, and the information services or financial services that they may be able to access through their phones. So I think that is more a knowledge gap, but I would say the device ownership is definitely an area that also needs to be looked at if we're to increase uptake and adoption of digital digital information services and financial services. And I think finally, the third point that I'll make is really on trust building. A lot of times when we're talking digital, there's not a lot of emphasis on building trust on the ground. And we found in our project, I was happy, Ugochi also mentioned that the importance of, I think Ugochi used the term of the structural undertones of community, but that's not only going to happen where there's community engagement. You need to understand what that is. And if there's going to be uptake of any digital information service or financial service, especially when the research also shows that there's low trust for some of these digital products and services, it'll be very important on the ground to have that community engagement with the right stakeholders, community leaders, religious leaders, traders in the markets, farmers, all the different people involved in the value chain, because at the end of the day, recognizing that, the technology alone cannot really substitute for those fundamental, for the fundamental trust building element that's required for successful adoption of any digital service. And so I think that also is a big area, looking at ways to just build trust on the ground as we're looking at rolling out these different services. So I think my time is also up, so leave it to the rest of the discussions and questions as we move along. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Narapo, and some clear calls to action there on how we can make digital services much more useful to a wider range of users. So thanks for bringing that into the conversation. We have a rich set of questions coming from the chat and the Q&A box. And so I'd like to dig into those now. I think one to start off with, which comes up quite often, is really, we see that there's opportunity to use digital services, but there are all these constraints to access, and who is accessing remains a question mark. And so there's a question that came up in the chat. I'd like to invite Daniel and the Dalberg team back on to share a bit more on the current sense of the number of digital financial services, digital information service providers, as well as the real uptake to date by agro producers.
Thanks, Chloe. So I think this is a question from Alexis on whether we have an initial sense of the current number of DFS and DIS providers. So right now, we do not have a census of providers. However, we have a listing of some of the players in Nigeria in the DFS and DIS space, and the value chains that they actually intervene. This information is going to be provided in the larger report. Back to you.
Thanks, Daniel. There's quite a number of questions coming up around insurance. So I'd like to invite Chikuwa back on to elaborate more on his experience working with Pula. So a few of those questions, one is really about how agricultural insurance products cover losses. Is it the cover of inputs only? Is it more comprehensive? What kind of insurance products are we seeing right now available to agro producers? And then another one question about insurance and trust, and to what extent agro producers are really bought into the idea of assurance at this point in time. So welcome back.
Hi, so good questions. we actually cover a broad range. It's modular in the sense that we could cover according to the preference of the client. So at this point, I also dropped at the chat, we deal with meso level players because it's difficult to go one-on-one insuring these farmers. It's not ideal, it's not profitable from a cost consideration standpoint. So we work with the ecosystem already on ground. There could be ecosystems whereby you have agro processors doing agro programs and they're investing in these farmers and they want to protect their investment, right? So in that case, it could be loans that they're giving to the farmer. So in that case, we insure the loans. Where you have agro dealers providing some form of input support, then it's more of the input value that we're insuring. And we also have scenarios where you have commercial banks and all that. So there we are bundling the insurance with the credits. The credits typically cover the yield because they're looking at end-to-end. The repayment sources from the yield. So what we do is that we simulate what the yield value would be and we insure that yield value. And in terms of what we actually cover, it's a broad range. I mean, from drought to floods to excess rainfall to pests and diseases to outbreak of fire, windstorm, the whole 9 yards. Anything that could possibly affect the input or the yield, provided they're not man-made. It has to be acts of God. So those are the risk, systemic risks that we cover. And in terms of trust, like we said, or I said earlier, we don't go to revamp or change the system. We work with what's already on ground and working. So there are a lot of trusted partners. You have the likes of the flour mills of this world, the Olams, the Afex, the Babangonas that have built trust with these farmers, that have done season in, season out, different crop planting programs with them and have built a reputation and the trust. So when we don't go into a new location and start trying to educate them, no, we educate the aggregators and we work with the aggregators to sensitize the farmers. So yeah, so that's how it works. I don't know if I left anything out.
No, that was really clear. Thanks so much. I was noticing as well that Nabil has been quite active sharing some examples from experience in Nigeria. So Nabil, I'd like to invite you to speak and share some of those experience and reflection on the report directly. And just to give you a few minutes before we do that. Before then, I'll invite Delapo back. Delapo, there's quite a question here about curiosity more about device financing. What might be the modality, the financial service partner in Nigeria? What could be the uptake? Do you have more thoughts to share on that call to action?
Great. Okay, thanks. Great question. So unfortunately, it was an engagement that we're working on that didn't take off just for different reasons. But I think the modalities will really start with one, getting a financial services, a financial services institution within the play, and then getting a farmer-facing organization as well within the mix. And ultimately, as a financial service institution, you want to understand, okay, what's this price point for this devices? What kind of disposable income does the farmer have? What kind of repayment plan can we put in place? At the end of the day, it's the economics of it that's going to determine whether a financier, will agree to finance a device. They're looking at risk, for example. So with M-COPA, for example, I believe there's a way the phone can be switched off. If you're defaulting on your payments, basically, they have a mechanism in place whereby at some point you'll no longer be able to use the phone. And so with, certain things like that, they're hoping to at least reduce the kind of risk when it comes to, collecting devices and maybe not paying. But I think the biggest thing is what kind of disposable income does the farmer have to be able to finance a device. And what kind of devices? Now in Nigeria, with the kind of inflation that is currently that's ongoing, devices that could have been gotten, let's say last year, 30,000 naira, let's say a base phone that you can use to access the internet, that's gone up by another maybe 10, 15 US dollars. So the question is, how can the farmer, based off of their incomes, what kind of payment plans can be put in place? To enable them. But there has to be an intermediary, I believe, between the financial institution and the farmers. Financial institutions going directly to the farmers is way too much risk. So there has to be an AFEX in between, a Babangona in between, a Koaman. I'm just mentioning some of different organizations that are farmer facing and because those organizations already provide different products to these farmers, largely more inputs, fertilizer, seeds. But for me, I don't think the model is, I think for for device financing, I really believe a similar model as what they're using to finance inputs can be used for devices as well. So yeah, that's my response. I hope I answered your question.
Great. No, I think those are some great thoughts about how to make it actionable. And I'm sure there are more ideas and experience also of people on this call. So if others have ideas, please share those as well in the chat. Thanks, Delapo. I had mentioned, Nabil, we would love to hear some of the experience that you've been sharing in the chat. Would you like to come on?
Hello?
Hello, yes, we can.
Yeah,
Gabenga, we can hear you.
Yes. So let me just quickly respond to some of those things that Nabi was actually talking about. So,
Perfect.
So majorly the tool that is actually used by the community and my worker is actually their smartphone. I made mention of the fact, just like Daniel report said, even when you go to the community and my workers are also community members. You will also notice that during their training, most of them, maybe 30% of them, we end up just having smartphone that could be used. But with time, after seeing the importance of their reporting, you see people now coming in and then having their own phone, and then with the help of their supervisor, they can actually also upload this tool on their phone. So, and then there was a question that was raised with regards to the reporting system. So the reporting system is always from the community animal worker to the state or their supervisors. So because the supervisors also are within the state. So, however, in the initial phase of it all, we are always the one that handle most of it, of the system, because we, on the long run, we will ensure that the system is quite okay. Then we hand over to the state, and then the state also go through some training with us, because they need to understand how they can work at the back end, they can also provide support to the community animal health worker. I think I have answered okay, now for the states where we have implemented this, so for we worked with Mexico for a year, and then we implemented this in Gombe and Adamawa State, which is under the Mexico RRA project, where we trained about 70 community animal health workers. And these guys are really doing fantastic work in those regions, with several reports, even from the states themselves, telling us that, look at, this is what these guys are actually giving to them. So, and then we've also implemented this in Bauchi State, Plateau State, and Kano State, which is under the EU-funded Lidiski project. And this key project is more around disease and knowledge integration. It's also about surveillance system, improving the surveillance system of the country. So majorly, those are the states where we have implemented the community animal health program, and they are making use of the digital information services that we have initiated in those locations. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I see that we have Ugochi's hand up. Ugochi, would you like to join the conversation?
Okay, thank you very much. So actually what I was just going to talk about was just chip into what Dolapo was saying. So I think that like I said earlier, we want to develop this sector sustainably. So we need to look at, the cultural undertones of whatever location it is that we're going to be providing solutions with, want to provide solutions to. And so I think one of the things that we can do to be able to, get through to these people is, yes, do adequate community entry and penetration, which we do with every all our projects and everything. But I also think that maybe the possibility of bundling services, this is because of what she mentioned, that's Dolapo now, talking about the, I think, device financing. So maybe bundling services with bundling device financing with, say, insurance and maybe some sort of educational tech service, together can maybe reach these people, because we have a model like that with our Livestock Express model. It's but for that one, we're looking at bundling animal identification and trace. Oh no, the Hoina model. Sorry, the Hoina project. Bundling animal identification and traceability with logistics and other services that will ensure more profit for the livestock producers. So that's what I was going to say. And I just also wanted to really stress on this, because maybe because I'm a woman and because I have seen some of the issues firsthand that women face in these communities. I think that it is important that we tailor our services to what they already have in place, or look at what they're already doing and see how we can tailor whatever innovation or solution we're bringing to them, and then use it as a way to achieve what we want to achieve. And I'll just give an example. This is not necessarily a livestock 24/7 service, but it's a product that I know about. It's called Pay-Per-Bill, and essentially the mantra for Pay-Per-Bill is where tech meets faith. And I remember when I was talking to the founder of Pay-Per-Bill, asking him why that is an important app, because it didn't make sense to me at the time. He told me that many Muslim women, and many of the people we're talking about now are Muslim women. Many of them, they do not go to the mosque. They don't really come outside to go and pay, to go to the mosque to fulfill their maybe financial obligations, based on their religion. And Pay-Per-Bill is an app that they can use on their phone that can help them do this from the comfort of their home. Now, because it is an app, and obviously smartphone and everything, it is something that is more tailored towards, in quotes, the people that have these devices. But this is something that we can see that, the woman can fulfill her religious obligation. She feels whole, and then she can take that wholeness into doing other things. Now, can we take that example now and bring it to this population of people that we want to serve, and see, are there things that we can leverage off of that are culturally acceptable by them, and then piggyback off of that and then provide services, or see how we can integrate our own innovation that we're bringing to them into what they already have, and then strengthen their system. So I think that if we are looking at sustainably developing the sector, I'm talking from the standpoint of the livestock sector now. I'm talking from the standpoint of the livestock sector. I really do not have a lot of experience with plant-based agriculture. But speaking for the livestock sector, if we are looking at this, I think that these are conversations that we need to have, and this should be our thought pattern when we are thinking through our product development and development, deployment, and adoption. So that's what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ugochi. Great reminders for us all there. Next, I'd like to invite Dikta to speak who works on the Spark program in Nigeria. Dikta, well.
Hello.
Hi, we can see you now.
You can see. Hello. Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you well.
Oh, hi, everybody. Let me first say that the presentations have been very thought-provoking, and especially when we are talking about the digital, exploring digital applications in the livestock. You know, we have been working on the Sahel region, pastoralist households, and how they cope and how they can improve their productivity within the climatic challenges that they face. And we have found from what we are saying here now is that the digital sustainability of digital knowledge will become very useful when we put at the background the challenges that some of them face. So I'm making this as a contribution and a question. It's one thing, I remember some time ago when we had the Minister for Agriculture, Dr. Akinwumi Adesina. He actually started this using mobile means to communicate to farmers. He started by wanting to purchase some handsets, some devices, and the e-money concept. But we all know that after he finished his tenure as a Minister for Agriculture, the government did not quite continue along that trajectory. So we need to know one thing, that the availability or the having the device, financing in the area we studied, is that most of them rely on cooperatives, not formal cooperatives, but informal cooperatives where a few people gather, buy for one person, and after they buy for the other person. And then we also discovered that one challenge is the charging of these devices, because when they move along, the pastoralists, they are not able to charge as much as they can. So to have a holistic and sustainable picture, we have to build in the charging of the devices as well as network coverages. So these are issues that I want to add to the conversation, so that as we are exploring the usefulness of digital technologies, we can have it all put in place. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for those comments. It's been a really rich discussion today, and there's lots more that we can talk about as well. But we're coming to the end of our session. So I would like to invite Siaka, the program director for AgroFin, to wrap us up and highlight for us the key takeaways that's coming out for him on the session.
Thanks, Chloe. And yes, indeed, it has been a great discussion. I think I'm even having a challenge trying to summarize some of the key points. But there was one great question there in the chart about a comparative study between Nigeria, Ethiopia, and the Kenyan studies. So perhaps one of the next steps we'll look into is seeing if we can do that comparative study, just so that we can get into what are the key drivers of change amongst these communities that we're looking to work with. Some of the key takeaways I've seen from this discussion today is there really needs to be a lot of work done around building a concerted effort to change or improve public infrastructure. The last speaker just said right now they need power for devices, power, electricity, access to power is a big topic across the continent. And that goes across not just Nigeria, but Ethiopia has the same challenges and Kenya to some extent as well. So how do we, as organizations in the development sector, how do private sector players come together to actually then request from their governments or collaborate with their governments to expand access to power and electricity? I like the point that one of the speakers made about a roundtable discussion. I think that's critical right now, is that we really need to come together as a community that is invested in making a significant change in the agricultural sector and say, how can we combine forces? Now, I do know that where we work, it's always a competitive environment. So there will always be need for someone trying out something and someone trying out something similar to see if they can get results a lot better than the other person and a lot more sustainably. But without ruling out competition, there is still a need to have these gatherings where practitioners come together, discuss the issues, and come up with the kind of right approaches to really tackling these challenges that we're facing. Last but not least, again, probably the issue of gender that goes across the three countries as well. How do we ensure that there's equitable access to the different resources, equitable access to finance, equitable access to information services, and how do we overcome those cultural barriers that we see across the different communities, both in the livestock and crop sectors? So a great and rich discussion. This is not the end. Mercycorps AgriFin, together with Spark, will be looking a lot of these issues, and we're looking to collaborate with a lot of you who are in the audience, a lot of the partners who have presented today. Some of them are already partners. So we're looking forward to actually working together to see if we can unpack and solve some of these great challenges that we face in the ag sector, especially in light of climate change and all these other points that have been presented in the various presentations. So thanks again for being part of this webinar series. And we look forward to addressing some of these questions that were not answered right now. As mentioned before, we shall answer them in the blog series. So look at our different channels. We are on our website, on different social media channels where we will be attending to these questions. And I do believe there might be some request for feedback through some formal channels. So please look out for that information and share all your thoughts and perspectives. Thank you. Thanks again, and have a good evening or good day from wherever you are. Back to you, Chloe.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Siaka. And thank you everyone for joining us. And as Siaka said, please watch out for the feedback form that will be shared. We look forward to hearing from you. And if you'd like to collaborate on any of these topics, either with Spark, AgroFin, if you'd like to get in touch with the panelists, the presenters at Delberg that you heard from today, feel free to reach out, and we're happy to have follow-up conversations as well. Thanks everyone, and have a great afternoon.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chloe.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.